Aloha! Today we are going over two elements of developing a reasonable information security plan based on the revised FTC Safeguards rules that came out in June.
Aloha everyone, and welcome to our very first episode of our podcast here at HPSI, where we discuss cybersecurity and compliance for SMBs. I'm your host, David. I've been with the company for almost a year now. My background is a lot of it is from Microsoft. I worked 8 years at Microsoft, and now mostly technical sales and consulting. I have my colleague here, Dan, who's way more technical than me. He's going to be our technical resource about the topics that we'll be discussing in this podcast that we have. Dan, I'll hand you over the mic.
Thanks, David. Dan Woods. I've been working in IT since the early 80s, and since early 2000, I've been working for First Hawaiian Bank for 15 years and then American Savings for 5 years, working in the information security and networking world.
Thanks, Dan. So we're here to discuss compliance, cybersecurity and compliance, specifically for SMBs. And there's a lot out there right now. There's CMMC, for example, for the government. And there's FTC Safeguards Rule, which is, I don't think it's widely known, but it's been out for a while now, specifically for financial institution. So we're going to talk about two key elements: how to develop a cybersecurity, information security program that is required for that specific compliance. Dan, so we both know how cybersecurity and compliance, it's a journey. It's not a one-time thing. You do it, you implement things, and that's it. You're done. It's not like that. It's a journey, mainly because every threat evolves, right? All the threats, cyber threats that we get evolves every day, and that's why all these compliances gets updated once in a while, more often than not, in all the industries right now. So in relation to FTC Safeguards Rule, it's been out for a long time now, but then it's been amended, and the most recent one, the final version of that rule, actually took into effect June 9th, 2023. And that just last week, I think, there's another amendment that went live in relation to that specific rule. So as cliche as it sounds, I mean, the only thing that's constant is change in this industry. You always have to make sure that you're up to date, and that's why we're here. That's why we started this podcast. We want to make sure that our not only our clients, but also just everyone out there that deals with cybersecurity and compliance has kind of like a one-stop shop, like a site that they could go to learn more about these things, especially for SMBs, those people that doesn't have a dedicated IT team. Talk about like just 1, 2, 3, or four person company. Hopefully this channel will help you guys at least get up to date with what's happening out there in IT.
Yeah, and I'd like to add on to that.
Yeah.
Going back to when you're talking about while they're revising this requirements and what have you, what it's really based on is whenever a company gets compromised or they find a hole that has been taken advantage of, they will turn around and analyze it, perform forensics, and then from that they will come up with what they think regulatory agencies think will help prevent this from happening again. And that's the reason why for GLBA they try to add additional requirements and revise this, and that adds on to what you're talking about. And it's kind of important to know they're not just making these changes because they feel like it. They actually feel that this would help, and there's no guarantee. Again, it's just what they believe will perform that task.
Yeah, no, totally agree. But for people that are new to the rule itself, again, our topic today is specifically the FTC Safeguards Rule. So just for a quick overview, that way everyone is on the same page. We'll just go over some quick items on just what it is and why does it exist, right? So for those of you guys that's the first time that's hearing about this, it's a rule, just to put it just in a nutshell, right? So it's a rule that was put in place to ensure all covered entities maintain safeguards to protect the security of customer information, so specifically to customer information. This is based from GLBA. And I know, Dan, since you've been in the banking industry for quite a while now, I'm pretty sure you've dealt with this. Can you provide our audience some thoughts about GLBA in general?
Yeah, Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act is, like you said, the goal is to protect customer information or personal identifying information. In particular, non-public personal identification information is the thing that they're trying to cover. So if you can go to a phone book and find someone's name and phone number, well, that's not enough. It has to be a customer list. It's stating that, hey, this is my customer and here's their name and phone number. There's the other information such as account information, PIN codes, taxes, anything that's customer related that's not public, that you can't just search and find it outside the black web, of course, but normal searches. This is the type of stuff that they're trying to prevent from getting out, and they're going to help you if you follow reasonable security plans.
Non-public personal information. So FTC actually, when they proposed the rule, the amendment to the rule back in, I think it was pandemic, 2020, they actually put out like a workshop regarding the proposed rule. So you can actually go to the ftc.gov website and you'll find it there if you really want to learn more about the safeguards rule. But one of the things that they actually mentioned there in regards to the type of information that's covered under this rule is that one example that they gave was, for example, if you have a list of customers, right? Let's say it's an Excel sheet, right, full of names. The name itself is public, right? So it wouldn't be covered under this rule. However, though, the fact that it's, especially if you put in their account list, account name, or HPSI active clients or something and similar, if you put that on that same file, that would make it as a non-public personal information. Mainly because while the name is public, the fact that the fact that it's your client is not public.
That's right. So that's great information to understand, what we have to cover. But what is it that companies have to do based on this now?
Yeah, so FTC Safeguards Rule requires covered financial institution, non-banking or banking financial institution, to develop, maintain, and implement an information security program, right? And that doesn't cover just one thing; it covers the whole 9 yards of your business: administrative, technical, physical safeguards as well, designed to protect customer information. So that, with your experience at the bank, is this something that you guys do, which is information security program? And if so, can you provide our audience some insights about how does that look like?
Oh yeah. So what we usually have to cover is, when you're talking about physical, you're talking about if doors are locked, if cabinets are locked, when you have this NPI information. Any servers that can contain it would normally be in a data center or a locked room that only a few people can get to. So that would kind of cover the physical, right? And you have cameras where you can monitor who goes in and out of the room. A log of some sort, whether it's manual or written, that's kind of administrative as well. And then the technical controls would be like access lists and who can access what file, who can read it, who can write it, those type of controls. And then for the testing, so you kind of talked about, well, once you implement it, what do you mean by maintaining it? And maintaining it is usually you decided, okay, you're going to have a locked door with a log and you can see who goes in and out. Well, you have to look at that log and see the people that have been going in and out, were they authorized? So that's an example of the physical and testing the controls later on.
It's more on the policies, right? Policies on protecting, safeguarding customer information, may it be physical, may it be technical through computers, and all of that. But really, there's multiple, I guess, attributes, what we call it, for a reasonable information security program, right? Based off the rule. Right? So the first thing that is required is it has to be written. Was that something that you did in your years?
Yeah, so the thing is they want to make sure that it's written down and that you're not just making it up.
Right.
And it's written down and it's followed, and that's the biggest thing.
Got
right.
it.
If it's not written down, you can say you have a security plan, but
well,
who are you kidding?
And I guess when if you ever get like a breach or something like that, that's what it's for, right? Because then you would need to follow all those processes and procedures that you've laid out in that program.
Well, let's take the example. If a company got breached, investigators are going to come in and they're going to try to find out and make sure that you have a reasonable security plan, and did you follow it? And those are the two things that they're going to do. And then they're also going to try to see if you are capable of even doing forensics. That actually probably is not part of this requirement here. Really, it's just that the policies and procedures are written and agreed on with management.
Yep. Yeah, so based off the text itself, text of the Safeguards Rule itself, it must be written and it must be appropriate. The program itself must be appropriate to the size of your organization as well as the complexity of your business. If you actually read the text itself, it actually lays out, it provides, FTC provided a guide on how to curate a reasonable information security program. There's 9 elements to it, and today we'll be talking about mainly 2 of those 9 elements.
Yeah, I think that's important, the fact that you're talking about the size of the company, because a lot of the controls that you would have on a company that has several people in there won't apply to a one-person shop.
Right.
So controlling who can access what file and what have you, you're the only one that has access to that information if you're a one-stop shop. But if you have 2 or more people, now your information security program has to be a lot bigger, right? So you have to have the controls in place.
Right, yeah, so that's a good point, because as part of somebody who's on the sales side of things, we started getting more and more inquiries about this specific clients. The fact that it went into effect a few months ago, they needed to comply, and most of them actually are either sole proprietor or just a 1 to 5, I would say, right? And again, that's that written information security program, for the sake of acronyms, let's use WISP, right? That WISP is going to look way more different than, for example, like a company that's running like 100 or 200 people.
Yeah.
Right.
So what is a reasonable information security plan? Well, it's, of course, like you said, it's the WISP, and it's usually based on a risk assessment. So a risk assessment is when you take a look at where you store this NPI information. Is it going through your network? Can you access it from your computer? Do you have papers printed out and they're in a cabinet? Where is this information? What does it travel through? Are there controls in this process? And the risk assessment is going to take a look at that. It's going to allow you to analyze every situation, which applications you use, if you encrypt the data and what have you. This is all going to be covered under the risk assessment, and the WISP would be performed after you've done the risk assessment.
Right. So if you think about it, you can't really develop and implement things to safeguard your customer information without knowing where the gap is.
Yeah, right? That's right. Yeah.
That's actually one of the 9 elements of developing a reasonable information security program is the fact that, again, like what Dan said, the WISP has to be based off a risk assessment. So you got to do that first. You need to identify where the gap is before you even fill it.
That's right.
Yeah.
And they do tell you what level you have to write. When you have 5,000 customers or more, you're going to have to do a risk assessment for each individual condition. Whether you have paper on the desk, and do you shred it after you're done with it? How do you store it? Stuff like that. But if you have less than 5,000, the risk assessment is going to be an overall risk assessment. You still have to evaluate every situation, but you're not going to have to write an individual one for each one. So that's one of the things that the customer size that they talk about determines the amount of work effort that you have to do.
Gotcha. That's the risk assessment, right? So conducting a risk assessment, because the WISP has to be based off a risk assessment. Another element that we'd like to discuss is the user end. Now, then this is the fun part, because as an IT, as part of the IT team, it's something that you can't control. Really, is the users. How would they act on, for example, threats, right? That comes on their way.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, when you think about it, the user is your weakest link.
Right.
They're the ones that you have to hope that when they receive an email, that they're not going to click on it if they don't know who it's coming from,
right,
or what it is, because most of the time, that's going to be the way in to the company and to be able to access this information.
Yeah. And examples are going to be the recent attacks in. I think the biggest one was the Vegas. Casino,
that's right.
Yeah. So, for that one though, it was. I think it was the support line. That got compromised, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And then as if you were the head of IT, that's something that you wouldn't be able to control, right? Because it was there.
Well, this is kind of worse because this was the IT team.
Oh, okay.
That actually the hacker was able to get administrative, username and password from the IT team. So that's even, the one area where you expect to really have people that understand how to protect your systems is your IT team.
Right.
And users, usually you have a different level of training. So for a user, you're going to train them not to click on emails and stuff like that.
Yep.
But for the help desk, you have to train them on how not to give away passwords or usernames without knowing 100% that this person is legitimately that person.
Right.
And with AI today, they can fake voices. They can do videos. It's not the same world it was 10 years ago. And that's something that is going to make it more and more difficult to understand when it comes to training in the security role.
Right, yeah, and you touch on a good topic, which is there's different levels of training that needs to be put in place in relation to the rule itself. If you're a user, you have a set of training. If you're in the help desk or IT, you will have a set of training. And the thing with the compliance itself is it's not a one-time thing. Again, we're going back to that statement that it's cybersecurity and compliance is a journey. It's not going to be it's not going to be a one-time thing. It has to be regular. There has to be a cadence on it, because again, threats do evolve. So does your trainings. So
plus people forget.
So there's multiple ways that we see organizations tackle this. If it's a larger organization, they might be able to do everything in-house. They might have a role that does the training and oversees that training. But if you're 5 to 10 people, right, you wouldn't have that bandwidth. But again, there's tools out there. There's what they call LMS, which is more for learning, right? It's a portal that you could upload your own video, or you could also, it has courses on it. And what's good about those type of solutions is that it's automated. You can schedule certain courses to come out to the users, and most importantly, you can track it, right? Did this person complete this training, right? can I set an expiration for this training to be completed? You can. So those are the things that could assist you in this specific requirement. All right, so we went over an overview of what this Safeguards Rule is. We went over at least the two key elements of developing a WISP, written information security program. Now we're towards the tail end of our first episode, and this is more of a question, right? This is going to be more of questions, and these are some questions that as a salesperson I've gotten, right, as people start to inquire about this. So one of the questions, especially for smaller businesses, is this going to be a complete overhaul of their existing IT infrastructure?
Well, that's a really good question, because without performing a risk assessment and looking at how NPI data is controlled in your environment today, can't really tell if you have to change a lot. It's possible that you could be following requirements. It's possible that everything is being met, and all you have to do is write it down. But a lot of times, there could be things missed. Over the years, it really depends on how long you've been in the industry. So let's say you're a CPA firm, you already kind of follow locking down papers in a locked cabinet, and not allowing just anyone to access it and stuff like that. But if you're kind of new, or if you're not following that, you might have to change your whole process, right? So it really depends on evaluating the situation, right, and making sure how close you are to actually meeting the requirements of GLBA.
Yep, that makes sense. That makes total sense. And then the second question that we have here is, okay, well, you implement, you follow the rules, right? You got through the whole list of key elements. You have a reasonable WISP. You created that. Are you done? Is this it? Am I compliant? Do I not have to worry about it next year? How does that work?
Well, I mean, that would be great. A lot of companies wouldn't need a compliance team if that was the case. Unfortunately, what it is, it's ongoing, and we kind of covered that earlier in this, where once you implement it, you have to evolve and you have to test. So when you create a risk assessment, you're going, okay, well, I have to perform this task. Are you performing? Well, you have to make sure, you have to be able to test and make sure you're following whatever you put in that risk assessment. If regulatory requirements change, and now all of a sudden you have to follow this, well, the only way you're going to know is if you're constantly testing against any amendments, but also in time as well. So let's say you have to keep a log of everyone. Like I said earlier, you have to keep a log of everyone going in and out of the room. If you're not testing to make sure that people are even putting that log in, you don't know if you're meeting those requirements. And you also don't know if you're keeping your environment secure. And there's the regulatory requirements. There's checking the box, and then there's also making sure that you're securing your information. So you can't do that if you're not testing that often, and maybe not once a year. It might even be quarterly.
Right. Yeah. So actually, on the text itself, it actually states some things that are needed, are required to be done on an annual basis or quarterly. It's actually on the text, and one of the items there that needs to be done annually is at least the risk assessment, like what you said. All right, well, that was quite of a topic, and we're just scratching the surface of it. There's a lot that needs to be discussed on this specific rule, FTC Safeguards Rule. So for next episode, we will be discussing about two additional key elements of developing a reasonable WISP, which is one is regularly monitoring and testing effectiveness, as you mentioned, of the safeguards that you implemented. And then the second one is a written incident response plan. So those are two required elements for the FTC Safeguards Rule. And that's what we'll talk about next episode.
Sounds good. Yeah, I mean, both of these are very important. And I can't wait till the next episode and we can cover this in more detail.
All right. Thank you for stopping by. Thank you. If you made all the way here, thank you. You need to be compliant. Looks like you need to be compliant. So we'll see you on the next episode.
See you there.